Hello everyone, welcome back to the Highland Greenhouse here at Carlton Carnivores. I've got another special species spotlight for you guys today. This is a species that has a bit of a tumultuous history taxonomically and has some very interesting relatives considering the geography that it lives in as well. Today's species that we're focusing on is Nepenthes faizaliana. This is a member of the Fusca complex in Borneo, and this species is found, currently at least, it's known only within the boundaries of Mulu National Park in northern Borneo. So these guys, they are a limestone restricted species, sometimes found on ultramafic or very metal heavy soils as well, but primarily limestone outcrops. And they are found from roughly 400 to about 1,600 meters in elevation. So a little over 1,000 to almost 5,000 feet in elevation. This is what we would consider an intermediate to warm highland species, basically, because the lower reaches of its range actually go down into the slightly cooler lowland type habitats. Also means that this species should actually be relatively tolerant of a pretty variable range of cultivation conditions. But within that habitat, again, they are found primarily on limestone outcrops, so they grow terrestrially in relatively open spaces, kind of a similar habitat to such species as Nepenthes northiana even, but this species does seem to be a little bit easier to take care of than northiana is. Now, this species is relatively closely related to particularly Boschiana and Stenophylla. Now, Boschiana is probably the species it's most similar to, but luckily, at least in the wild, you would never confuse the two because Mulu National Park, where these guys are found, is in northern Borneo, and the mountains that Boschiana is found is way down in southern Borneo. Now, there is a potential that this species may be found on some of the mountains surrounding the park because those are very inaccessible areas that haven't been studied much, but that still means it's northern Borneo restricted and will not be found near its relative down further south. It's also similar to Stenophylla, but is relatively easy to be told apart because of the shape of the upper pitchers, as well as the coloration is kind of distinct on these guys, and we'll get to that in a minute. Now, this species can grow up to 6 to 8 meters in length, so almost 30 feet in length when they're fully grown. And when they are growing up, of course, early on, the rosetted stage when they're young, very short internodes on that circular stem, and those will elongate as they get older. The stem is simple, circular, roughly a centimeter in diameter on average, and attaches several leaves that are very distinctly petiolate. Those petioles come down and they clasp almost all the way around the stem at their base here, and then come out again, very narrow petiolate, almost tubular inside where they clasp together tightly, and then come out to a broad, roughly ovular lamina. It might be slightly broader towards the tip than it is near the base, but it then comes down to a slightly narrow acute tip that runs down to the tendril. Very distinctive on the species also, they have this indumentum of little tiny orange-brown hairs that will run along the edge of the leaf and also on the midrib, as well as a couple other places. Immature pitchers, the fully open pitchers may have a very thin velvety fuzz on them. That's a trait that you will find in these guys, that indumentum, that you won't find in Boschiana, for example. Now, the pitchers themselves, the lower pitchers are actually relatively infrequently produced. They're made by young plants like this one is, but then they are relatively quickly kind of cut out from production, and the plant very rapidly goes to upper pitchers. So these are kind of a very infrequent young plant or basal only production. These pitchers can get to almost 8 inches tall, and they are generally roughly cylindrical in shape, but with a slight bulbous section, slightly more ovular in the lower third to half or so of the pitcher, up to a distinctive but slight midrib, kind of a hip right there. It narrows very slightly there up to the roughly cylindrical upper portion of the pitcher. Two pretty distinctive, slender, but very significantly fringed wings run up the front of the pitcher right up to the mouth, and the mouth is a relatively teardrop shaped, very sloped upward, kind of curves forward in many cases, and surrounding that is, on the lower pitchers at least, a relatively simple but still kind of flashy peristome. It's rounded, it kind of curves around the edge of the mouth. It flares a little bit more up along the back of the neck, up underneath the lid, but not too much. Sometimes a little bit crenellated, but usually fairly simple on the lowers. And then, of course, has a relatively broad, either ovular or kind of chordate heart-shaped lid. Now, the coloration of this species is one thing that really sets it apart. Similar to Stenophylla, it can have kind of like this, a very pale cream or greenish background with very distinct, large, blotchy mottling of red or kind of purplish. But they can also have this really rich, like crimson red background with dark purple to black blotches. And that color is similar in the peristome as well. It may be paler, like in this one, with red stripes, or it may be bright red or deep red with black stripes running through it. That coloration is kind of similar also, the darker forms to Boschiana, the lighter forms more so to Stenophylla, but these guys tend to have slightly larger and more heavily mottled blotches than Stenophylla does, and certainly a bit more, actually a little bit less blotching oftentimes than the lower pitchers of Boschiana. Now, as these guys transition to uppers, that's where they become kind of distinct from both of their relatives again. A little more similar to some variations of Boschiana uppers, but very distinctive from Stenophylla. Now, this plant, of course, is quite a ways from reaching that mature state, but it will not take too long once these guys get repotted for it to start producing those uppers. Upper pitchers are even larger than the lowers. They can reach more than a foot in height, and they tend to be fairly slender, but with, again, a bulbous section in the bottom. So the lower, roughly quarter to a fifth of the pitcher tends to have a slightly more bulbous or slightly ovular swelling area right where it curves up from the tendril to a distinctive hip, and then the upper section again is very slender and either cylindrical or very slightly funnel shaped. It loses the wings on the front completely, and the peristome actually gets broader and flares out more as opposed to curving around the mouth of the pitcher. So it flares out and becomes more crenellated roughly along the edges. The coloration often matches that of the lower pitchers, although maybe slightly more pale. Some forms may still be the very, very dark red coloration with black mottling and such, and dark red peristome that you see in some of the lower pitchers. Others may be, again, more like this. They may be heavily mottled with cream and red and bright green and red striped peristomes. Very, very striking coloration on these guys. And that's one thing that does make this a little bit more of a sought-after species than a couple of its relatives. The fact that it could be more lowland tolerant also makes it a little more sought-after, but for some reason it's still not commonly seen in cultivation. Now, once it's producing those upper pitchers, that's generally the only thing that the plant produces from there on until it produces lower basal rosettes, kind of like you can see this guy's actually producing some young ones here. I'll probably be snapping those off to make it focus its energy on the main shoot. But for the most part, it sticks with those upper pitchers basically from just as it barely starts to vine throughout the rest of its life cycle. It keeps with those. And of course, those are more attractive to flying insects because they tend to be up in the canopy a little bit brighter colored, and that'll attract the flying insects to capture, whereas the lower pitchers that are a little bit darker are more apt to be capturing crawling things like beetles and slugs and such. Now, in cultivation, of course, this species, again, should be a relatively easy species to take care of. It will do well in your general Nepenthes mix, although maybe a little more aerated, a little more rocky due to, again, they live in a limestone habitat. So a 1-to-1 sphagnum perlite mix might do well, but you might want to throw in, I will do my coconut chips oftentimes, or you can even try and throw in some extra things like maybe pumice, or you could even try some crushed limestone to see if that might actually be suitable for these guys. Whatever it is, you want it to be fairly moisture retentive, but very well aerated. You don't want a dense soil that's going to become anaerobic and trigger rot in the roots, because that will make the plant die really, really quickly. So moisture retentive, but very well aerated, very loose soil. If you want to top it with sphagnum moss, that's probably okay. It can help be an indicator. Just as that moss is starting to dry out, spritz it a little bit with water, and that should be about where the plant wants to be, just kind of constantly, evenly moist. These guys will like a lot of light because, again, they're growing on fairly open limestone ridges and outcrops and such, so as close as you can get to full sun, more or less, is what these guys are probably going to be wanting. Now, in most places, like in the US here, outdoor conditions aren't really suitable for these guys because of the humidity and the changes in seasons, that it makes it hard to keep these guys happy long term. So indoors, you want to give them basically the strongest artificial lighting that you can provide, and that is what they'll be happiest with. Humidity, moderate. Again, these guys should be fairly tolerant. If you acclimate them to lower, more household humidity, they should be fairly okay with that. But upper limits of 60 to 80%, they will probably be happy with that as well, as long as there's a little bit of air movement going on so that they don't become stagnant. And temperatures, again, this is a species that goes down to 400 meters, which is generally a lowland environment, but it also reaches 1600 meters, which is very strictly highland. So these guys will do well in probably intermediate conditions, so temperatures of maybe 85, almost 90 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, dropping down into the upper 60s Fahrenheit at night, and they will probably be happy. But you can also let them get cooler at night if you're keeping them like I am with other highland species. My upper portions of this greenhouse are probably more intermediate than highland in summer anyway, so they're happy with that. But in the winter, it will become truly highland, and these guys do just fine in that as well. So they're fairly tolerant, fairly adaptable, just got to give them the time. Now, because they're that adaptable, I would think that they would be fairly common and easy to grow in cultivation, but they don't seem to be very commonly found for some reason. If you're lucky to find one, though, they do tend to be not the most expensive plants, but something like a plant of this size, or maybe a rosette that is newly rooted from like this size, that might range between $45 and maybe $80 a piece. So relatively inexpensive, but not the most inexpensive Nepenthes you might find. Still, it might be something that may be within your budget. So if you can find this species, that really distinctive sharp modeling that they have and the really colorful uppers that they will eventually grow out are definitely worth keeping in mind for trying to pick up this species. Now, that is about all that I have on that one right now. Certainly, if there's anything that I've missed, any questions that you have, leave those in the comments below the video here. Give a like if you enjoy learning about this species. Subscribe if you want to hear more about what's coming up. Share the videos if you know somebody else who wants to learn about that species. If you would like to learn more about the plants and animals that I work with, you can find my website at carltoncarnivores.com, where the blog and database are at. And you can also find me on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Facebook, etc. at Carlton Carnivores. And if you'd like to help support the production of these videos, because taking the time out to do this, editing the videos, of course, is time consuming, kind of expensive, because I'm not able to repot other things while I'm recording this and doing the editing and so on. You can support by subscribing to the channel, of course. That gets us closer to monetization, watching the videos all the way through. You can also buy plants or merchandise at the website shop as well. Or you can become a Patreon member where you get early access to the videos, access to the monthly seed contests that I do for members there, and other exclusive kickbacks as well. Or you can also, if you don't want to do monthly subscriptions like that, you can do a one-time donation at places like coffee.com or contact me for other methods. Most of the links for these things will be in the video description below, but until next time, I'm Hawken Carlton, and this is Carlton Carnivores.